The last time I saw my son-in-law, he was speeding away from me, leaving me alone in the woods. He thought it was over, but that was the last mistake he ever made. You see, at 62, I had finally reached a place in my life where I thought I could breathe. After decades of military service and a long marriage with Barbara gone now for almost 2 years, I figured my days of fighting were over. I'd done my time. The lake house was supposed to be my retreat. The one place I could relax, let go of the pain, and just exist. But that all changed on the camping trip with Mia and Greg in June of 2019. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. Mia, my daughter, had been pushing me for months to join them on this trip, some kind of bonding experience. She said I needed to let go of my old habits, enjoy the moment, but all I wanted was peace. Still, I agreed. I didn't want to push her away. The first few hours felt like any other trip. The hike was nice, the fire felt warm, and the mountains were stunning. But something about Greg didn't sit right. There was an odd intensity in his questions about the lake house, the future of it, what would happen to it when I was gone, what Mia planned to do with it. I tried to brush it off, but it kept coming back. Over dinner, he asked again, "You know, Dad, what's your plan for the house? You've got to start thinking about it." His eyes held a strange glint, as if he already saw it as his. That night, I lay awake in the tent. The wind outside was soft, the air crisp, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Greg's tone, his unspoken urgency about the house, unsettled me. The next morning, I woke up to nothing. The campsite was eerily quiet. My bag was gone. My phone, too, Greg's truck, gone. The fire was out, and I could barely see anything in the dark. Panic crept in, but I fought it back. No, this was no accident. I had been left behind, deliberately. I'm a survivor. I didn't panic. My military training kicked in like muscle memory. I rationed my food, took stock of my surroundings, and started to move slowly, deliberately. But even as I made my way through the woods, each step felt heavier. Not from exhaustion, but from the realization that Greg had done this. He had planned it. When I made it back to the ranger station, I found the receipt, $800 for the campsite, months in advance, in Greg's name. My heart sank. This wasn't an accident. This was a carefully calculated move. And the lake house wasn't the only thing he was after. It was me. He wanted me out of the picture. Gone. When I got home, Mia was frantic like any daughter would be, terrified that her father had wandered off. But Greg, he wasn't worried. "He got lost, Mia. You know how he is," he said. His voice smooth, rehearsed. He wasn't concerned about me. He was concerned about covering his tracks. But the thing that really got to me, the thing I couldn't shake, was the campsite reservation. I slipped it into my drawer, underlined the date, and kept it there, because I knew Greg wasn't just after a weekend trip in the woods. He had a plan, and it didn't include me. That night, I stood by the window of the house, staring out at the lake. The house, the legacy Barbara and I had built, was all I had left, and now it was slipping away. Not because I was getting too old, but because Greg had decided it was his. And that's when I made up my mind. I wasn't just going to let him take it. I wasn't going to let him take me. I had the skills to survive the woods, but Greg had no idea how well I could fight back. Back in Asheville, the days following the camping trip felt like a blur. Mia, of course, was concerned, more so when she learned how long I'd been gone and how close I had come to not making it back. But Greg, he kept playing the part of the worried husband, as if he had no idea how his actions had led me to the woods in the first place. As the days passed, I started noticing things that made my skin crawl. Little inconsistencies in his story. I would catch him staring at me sometimes, like he was trying to read me, to figure out how much I knew. Mia was oblivious, of course, consumed with the idea that I just wandered off like an old man losing his bearings. But it wasn't just that. Greg's presence at the house had started to feel off. He would come around more often, dropping by unannounced, talking about settling the estate, but his tone was always too casual, too rehearsed. I knew what he was trying to do, make it seem like he had the right to talk about the lake house, like it was already his. The more I saw him, the more I understood that Greg wasn't interested in me. He was interested in the house, in controlling the only piece of legacy I had left. One evening when I was sitting at the kitchen table, the phone rang. It was Greg, but I wasn't sure why he was calling at that hour. When I picked up, I heard something I wasn't supposed to. "Yeah, babe, we SIL get rid of him soon enough. It SIL's too easy. He SIL's so damn old. He SIL'd never see it coming." I stood there, frozen, the phone pressed to my ear, feeling like someone had just punched me in the gut. I was numb, but I wasn't blind. Greg wasn't just talking about a house. He was talking about me. His voice was too casual, too confident, like he had already won, like he knew he could push me out, that I was just some old man waiting to fade into the background. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. The first wave of betrayal hit me like a freight train. But then something else surfaced. Anger. The kind of anger that I had learned to control during my years in the army. But now, it was impossible to ignore. The next morning, as I walked through the house, trying to process what I had just heard, my gaze fell on the stack of bills and papers on the counter. Something caught my eye. A letter from the bank. A $5,000 withdrawal, unauthorized. I froze. The blood drained from my face. I knew my accounts like the back of my hand. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a simple error. Greg had gotten into my account, and now he was stealing from me, just like he had been trying to steal the house. I couldn't let it slide. I knew then that I had to gather evidence. I had to protect myself, because the truth was, I wasn't just dealing with a greedy son-in-law anymore. I was dealing with a man who was capable of anything, and if I didn't stop him, everything I had worked for, everything Barbara and I had built, would be gone. I called Cole Edwards, an old army buddy who had always kept tabs on the people I SIP'd known in the service. He didn't SIP to ask questions when I explained the situation. He just agreed. "I SIP'd, I'll handle it. You focus on staying one step ahead of him." I'd known Cole for years. A good man, a man who could get things done when I needed it most. But that wasn't all. I needed someone with legal expertise. Someone who wouldn't just be on my side, but who could also help me navigate the mess Greg had created. So I called Sarah Stevens, the lawyer who had helped me with minor legal issues in the past. Sarah had a calm demeanor, which was exactly what I needed right now. She didn't waste time asking for details. She immediately went into action, advising me to dig deeper into Greg's financial dealings. At first, I didn't know what I was looking for, but soon I started pulling at the threads, and one by one they began to unravel. That's when I found it. A forged power of attorney document, filed in my name. It looked legitimate. The county office had even stamped it, but something was off. The handwriting wasn't mine. The signatures weren't mine. It was all Greg's work. His fingerprints were all over it. The house, the bank account, the power of attorney. It was all part of his plan. But I had one thing he didn't: time. Time to wait, to gather the right evidence, to bide my time. Greg thought I was a fool, that I wouldn't fight back. He thought I was just some old man who would fade into the background. But he didn't know me. He didn't know what I was capable of. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to lose everything because of his greed and lies. Ends with Eric deciding to take methodical action and gather evidence. After the phone call, after the bank letter, I knew I couldn't sit back any longer. Greg had tipped his hand, and I wasn't going to let him walk all over me, not without consequences. But I also knew that acting out of rage wouldn't solve anything. No, I needed a plan. A smart one. A patient one. So I started gathering evidence. Not with the reckless energy of someone desperate, but with the cool, methodical precision I'd learned over years of military service. Every piece of information, every small detail, had to fit together. One wrong move, and I'd lose my chance. I couldn't afford that. First, I reached out to Cole Edwards, an old army buddy. We'd served together for years, and though he'd left active duty long ago, I knew I could count on him. He wasn't a detective, but he knew how to gather information without being noticed. "I need you to follow Greg," I told him. "Just watch him, see what he's up to. Don't let him know. He's slippery, and I need to know everything." Cole didn't ask questions. He never did. "I'll start tonight," he said. It wasn't long before Cole started sending me regular updates. At first, it was just a few stray observations: Greg meeting with a lawyer, Greg coming out of a business office, his car parked at an address I didn't recognize. But soon it started to form a pattern. Greg was planning something. I wasn't sure what yet, but I had a hunch. Meanwhile, I contacted Sarah Stevens, my lawyer. I had worked with her on minor legal matters in the past, but now I needed her expertise. I told her everything about the forged power of attorney, about the bank withdrawal, and about my growing suspicion that Greg was using more than just family manipulation to get what he wanted. Sarah didn't waste time. She told me to keep track of everything, every document, every email, every conversation. She knew how these things worked. "I'll run a title search on the lakehouse," she said. "If he's been trying to manipulate the legal process, we'll find it. And I'll get in touch with a few colleagues to see what we can uncover about his financial situation." Sarah's advice was exactly what I needed. I started digging through my own files, pulling out every piece of paper that might be relevant. Receipts, contracts, old legal documents from when Barbara and I had first bought the lake house. I even went back through old tax returns, the ones I kept meticulously in a file labeled important. But then something unexpected happened. One evening, as I was going through the papers, I found a letter from a lawyer dated a few weeks ago. It was a notice from the county office, an official document saying that someone had filed a power of attorney in my name, giving full control of my estate to a third party. The document was stamped, sealed. It looked legitimate. I held it in my hand, staring at it, my pulse racing. I knew it wasn't mine. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't just some legal error. It was a forgery, a calculated move to transfer my entire estate to Greg, including the lake house. I froze. My instincts kicked in, but I didn't act rashly. No. I folded the paper slowly, slipped it into an envelope, and locked it away. I had to be smart about this. It was one thing to know something was wrong. It was another to have the proof. And now I had it. I had evidence. I wasn't going to let Greg steal my family's legacy, the one thing Barbara and I had worked for all our lives. The next day, I went to see Sarah. "I found something," I said, handing her the forged power of attorney. "Greg Sepp's been making moves, and I Sepp's not going to let him get away with it." She looked over the document carefully, then set it down. "This is good," she said, her tone serious. "It's exactly what we needed to confirm that he's been using deceit to try and gain control of the lake house. Now we need to make sure we can tie him to all of this. His movements, his meetings. We'll start with Cole's surveillance." I felt the weight of everything starting to shift. It wasn't just about protecting the house anymore. It was about protecting myself, and about stopping Greg before he ruined everything. I knew Greg had a temper, but I never thought he'd go this far, to manipulate Maya, to take advantage of my trust, and now to forge legal documents to steal from me. I wasn't about to let that slide. The days that followed were a blur of meetings with Cole and Sarah, surveillance reports, and legal paperwork. I started seeing the bigger picture. Greg was in deeper than I thought. He had been using my name to access my finances, to make illegal moves behind my back. The lake house was just the beginning. He was in trouble, deep trouble, and if I didn't act fast, he might drag me under with him. It wasn't just about defending the house anymore. It was about winning, about proving that he couldn't just walk over me. The more I uncovered, the more I realized just how deep Greg had buried himself. He wasn't just a greedy son-in-law. He was a man desperate enough to ruin everything for the sake of what he believed was rightfully his. I couldn't let him win. Not like this. That night, as I sat by the window watching the sun set over the lake, I knew the next steps would be crucial. The evidence was mounting, and soon it would be time to take action. I wasn't going to wait for Greg to make the first move. I was going to take control of the situation. This was my home. My family, my legacy. I had one chance to get this right, and I wasn't going to miss it. Ends with Eric preparing for the final push, determined to gather more evidence and stop Greg once and for all. By September 2019, the pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place. Greg had no idea what was coming. For months he had been operating under the assumption that I was too old, too weak, too out of touch to fight back. But he couldn't have been more wrong. Cole had been working tirelessly, tracking Greg's every move. His surveillance had uncovered even more than I expected. Greg meeting with a lawyer who specialized in estate theft and fraud, conversations with shady figures in dark corners of town, and late-night phone calls where he discussed how to push me out of the picture. I couldn't help but admire the sheer audacity of it all. Greg was playing a dangerous game, one where he thought the rules didn't apply to him. But now I was playing it too, and I knew the game better than he ever would. I kept gathering evidence. Every day brought something new. Greg was making moves on the house. I could feel it. He was putting pressure on Mia, trying to manipulate her into agreeing with his plans. He would always play the concerned husband, the man who had the right to manage everything, as if the house were already his. But Mia, she was starting to see through the act. Slowly, she was waking up to the truth. One evening, I caught Greg at the lakehouse. He'd made a habit of showing up, spending more and more time there, like he had some sort of claim on it. This time, I decided to confront him. I parked my car down the road, out of sight, and waited. The sun had set, and the glow of the lakehouse windows illuminated the trees around me. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. But this was my life, my home, and I wasn't about to let him take it without a fight. I saw Greg's car pull into the driveway. He got out, his posture rigid, like he owned the place. He walked around the house, inspecting things, touching the fence, the shed, the dock. He was doing more than just inspecting. He was claiming he had already made up his mind that it would be his, even if he had to tear apart my entire life to get it. I watched him for a few more minutes before I moved. Slowly, silently, I approached the back door. I had already swapped out the locks earlier that day. Greg didn't know it, but I had a key to the house now, and he didn't. When I walked inside, I took a moment to look around. The house had been ours, Barbara's and mine. The memories were still fresh, despite the years that had passed since her death. Every room, every piece of furniture was part of the life we had built together. But now it was a battleground, and I wasn't going to lose it. I heard Greg coming around the side of the house, so I quickly moved into the kitchen. I didn't want him to know I was there just yet. I wasn't sure how this would go, but I knew I had to confront him. The door creaked open. I could hear his footsteps on the wood floor, slow, deliberate. He called out, "Dad?" His voice sounded too casual, too confident. He was playing the role of the son-in-law again, the concerned family member who wanted what was best for everyone. But there was no mistaking it. He was playing me. I stepped into the hallway, making sure to stay just out of sight. "What do you want, Greg?" I asked, my voice steady. It was the first time I'd used his name without the affection I'd once felt. His head snapped around at the sound of my voice, and for a split second I saw the flash of surprise in his eyes. Then he quickly masked it, slipping into that charming persona he liked to wear. "I didn't expect you to be here, Dad," he said, feigning a smile. "Just wanted to check on the place." "Check on the place?" I asked, stepping forward, my gaze fixed on him. "Is that what you such calling it now?" He shifted on his feet, clearly uncomfortable with the tone in my voice, but he was good at covering it up. I supped him, just making sure everything up's in order, for Mia. I didn't set by it. Not for a second. "For Mia?" I repeated. "You set been making moves on this house, Greg. Don't set act like I don't set know." The smile faltered, and I could see the cracks in his facade. He took a step toward me, but I didn't set flinch. "I don't set know what you start talking about," he said, trying to stay calm. But there was a tremor in his voice. "Everything sep's fine. You stop are just getting old, Eric. It's sep's time to let go." Let go. That was the line, wasn't it? He thought I was ready to fade into the background. He thought I was just going to roll over and let him take what was mine. "Well, I sit ma not ready to let go," I said, my voice low but firm, "and I sit ma not going anywhere, Greg. You can sit, have it." There was a long pause. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The tension between us was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Greg spoke, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You don't understand, do you? You're in the way. Mia's mine now. This house is mine, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure it stays that way." I met his gaze, unflinching. You think Mia Sip's gonna let you tear apart her family for a house? Greg's face twisted with frustration, but it didn't scare me. She will, she has no choice. This is just the way it has to be. I didn't say anything. Instead, I turned and walked toward the door. No, Greg. You don't get to make that decision. I not giving up my family or my house. As I left, I could feel his eyes on me, burning with resentment, but I didn't care. I had everything I needed. The house was mine, and I was going to make damn sure Greg didn't get it. Ends with Eric's resolve solidifying. He's not giving up. He has the evidence, and the final confrontation is looming. By October 2019, the pressure on Greg was starting to show. His usual swagger had turned into nervous energy. He was still coming around the lake house more often, trying to assert control, acting like the place was already his. But I wasn't blind. Every time he showed up, I watched him, noting his every move. It was clear now that he had no intention of backing down. But something had shifted. Greg was starting to panic. His meetings with shady lawyers were more frequent. His phone calls became more secretive. I could hear the frustration in his voice when he thought I wasn't listening. The same frustration he had tried so hard to hide for so long. I had been collecting evidence with Cole's help, documenting Greg's every misstep. The surveillance had uncovered more than I had hoped for. Greg had been meeting with people who weren't just interested in legal advice. They were people with a reputation for dirty tricks. Criminals, really. They had ties to shady business deals, money laundering, and most troubling of all, fraud. Greg wasn't just after the lake house. He was sinking deeper into a hole he didn't know how to get out of, and I was going to make sure he stayed there. I could feel the walls closing in on him. The more evidence I collected, the clearer it became that Greg was trying to cover his tracks, but I was already one step ahead. Thanks to Sarah's legal expertise and Cole's surveillance, I had everything I needed. Now it was just a matter of timing. One afternoon, as I sat in my office, going over the latest batch of documents, a message came through from Cole. It was a short, cryptic text. Greg's at the house again. He's with someone. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. This wasn't just a regular visit. Something was going on. I grabbed my keys and headed out. The drive felt longer than usual, my mind racing with thoughts of what I might find. Was Greg trying to move forward with his plan? Was he finally making his move? When I arrived at the lake house, I parked down the road and approached on foot, staying out of sight. I didn't want to tip him off just yet. The closer I got, the more I could hear their voices. Greg's voice was low, urgent, but I couldn't make out the words. He was talking to someone, but who? Someone important, someone who could help him push me out of the way. I crept closer, staying hidden in the trees, trying to get a glimpse of the scene unfolding. I saw him. Greg was standing with a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a rough look to him, not the type of person you'd expect to see in the front yard of a peaceful lake house. Greg was speaking quickly, his hands moving as if to emphasize his words. Whatever they were talking about, it seemed important. It seemed like a deal. I didn't know what kind of deal Greg was making, but I knew enough to understand that it was something I wasn't going to let happen. As they spoke, I began to piece things together. Greg was bringing in help. He was making connections with people who could get things done the dirty way. If it wasn't enough that he had already tried to manipulate the legal system, now he was reaching out to people who didn't mind bending the rules or breaking them completely. I couldn't risk waiting any longer. I needed to act fast, but I had to be careful. If I confronted Greg now, it could all fall apart. I had to gather more. I had to get the full picture. I turned and left the scene, but not before snapping a few photos. I wasn't going to let this opportunity slip through my fingers. I would need every piece of evidence to make sure Greg couldn't wiggle his way out of this one. Over the next few days, Cole and I kept a close watch on Greg's movements. His desperation was becoming more obvious. He was making bigger mistakes, being more reckless in his attempts to control the lake house. He knew the clock was ticking, but he didn't know that I was already steps ahead, collecting everything I needed to bring him down. The most critical piece of the puzzle came when I received a call from Sarah. She had managed to get her hands on some of Greg's financial records, things that were damning to say the least. Greg had been siphoning money from the family business accounts and funneling it into his own secret accounts. It was the final nail in the coffin. Greg had been so focused on the lake house, so consumed by his need for control, that he hadn't even noticed how far he had gone. He had stolen from us. He had gone after the house, and now I had everything I needed to make sure he wouldn't get away with it. The next morning, I met with Sarah to discuss the next steps. "We've got the evidence we need," she said, her tone confident but serious. "Trell prepare the legal filings. We'll move forward with the injunction first. Freeze the assets, prevent him from transferring ownership of the house." I nodded. "Let's make it happen." We sat there for a few more minutes, going over the details. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready. It had taken months of careful planning, of watching, waiting, gathering evidence, but it had all come together. Greg was done, and I was going to make sure of it. Ends with Eric's resolve hardening. The legal steps are now in motion, and he's prepared to confront Greg once and for all. By November 2019, the pressure was mounting. Greg could sense something was wrong, but he didn't know exactly what. His usual confident arrogance had started to crack. He wasn't making the same bold moves anymore. Now he was on edge, more desperate than I had ever seen him. Every time he came to the lake house, I saw the signs. His movements were more erratic, his temper shorter. He would turn up unannounced, demanding I hand over the keys or claiming that it was time to settle the estate. The same rehearsed excuses, the same manipulation tactics, but this time they didn't work. Mia, still caught in the middle, came to me one evening after a heated argument with Greg. Her face was strained, her eyes red from crying. "I don't know what's happening, Dad," she said, voice shaking. "Greg Sep's been different. I feel like I'm losing control of everything. Like Sep's pushing me out." I knew then that she was finally seeing the truth. The truth I had been trying to protect her from for months. I had been careful not wanting to break her heart. But now I couldn't hold back any longer. "Yeah," I said softly, my voice steady despite the weight in my chest. "Greg Sep's been playing both of us. Sep's been using you to get to the lake house. Sep's been manipulating you and stealing from me." Her eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" I didn't want to overwhelm her, but I couldn't hold it in any longer. "I've been gathering evidence. I've seen everything. The forged documents. The secret meetings. He's been trying to take control of the house, and he's been lying to you. He's already been siphoning money from the family business accounts." Mia took a step back, as if the world had shifted beneath her feet. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, he wouldn't set." I didn't set, no. I stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I know you didn't set, but you need to see what Sep's doing, Mia. Sep's not the man you think he is." The silence between us hung heavy. For a moment Mia just stood there, absorbing the weight of the words I had just dropped on her. Then, without warning, she collapsed into my arms, tears streaming down her face. "I can believe this. I thought he was doing this for us, for the family." I didn't have the words to comfort her. I just held her. What else could I say? The damage had already been done, but I wasn't going to let Greg destroy our family. Not without a fight. The next morning, Mia came to me again, this time with a look of determination in her eyes. "I want to help," she said. "I want to make sure he doesn't get away with this." Her voice was stronger now, and I could hear the shift in her tone. She was no longer the victim of Greg's manipulation. She was ready to fight alongside me. "We'll take him down together," I said, my voice firm. "We have everything we need. All we have to do is follow through." At that moment, everything changed. Mia had chosen to stand by me. It wasn't just about the lake house anymore. It was about the truth, about family, and about Greg finally being held accountable for everything he had done. The next day, I received a call from Sarah. She had been working around the clock, pulling together the final legal filings. "I'm ready," she said, her voice confident. "I've got everything we need for the injunction. We can freeze his attempts to transfer the property right now. We'll go public next." I felt a surge of relief, but it was tempered with a quiet rage. Greg had no idea what was coming. He thought he could walk all over me, but now he would learn that I wasn't the same man he had underestimated. I met with Sarah later that afternoon, going over the final details. "It's time," she said, handing me the legal documents. "This is going to stop him cold." As I left her office, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I had been waiting for this moment for so long. The moment when I could finally take action, when I could bring everything to light, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. Greg wasn't going to give up without a fight. He would try to spin the story, try to manipulate Mia into turning against me, but I wasn't afraid. This wasn't just about the lake house. It was about justice. The next few days were a blur. Mia and I kept our distance from Greg, but I knew he was watching. He had to know something was coming, but it didn't matter. The wheels were in motion, and nothing was going to stop them. I spent the next few nights reviewing everything. The forged power of attorney, the fraudulent bank transactions, the surveillance reports from Cole. Everything was falling into place. Greg had been sloppy, and now he would pay for it. The next morning, I took the first step. I filed the injunction to freeze the estate's assets, preventing Greg from making any more moves. I watched as the court documents were served to him. I knew he wouldn't take it well. He'd probably try to spin some story to Mia, make her believe that I was overreacting, but it didn't matter anymore. The truth was out. The final confrontation was coming. Ends with Eric preparing for the showdown. The legal battle is now in full swing, and there's no turning back. By January 2020, everything had come to a head. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension. Greg had hired the best lawyer money could buy, a man who was known for his ability to twist the law and manipulate the truth. He had been confident at first, almost smug, as if he believed he could buy his way out of everything. But now, as I sat across from him, I could see the cracks in his armor. The case was about to go to trial, and the evidence we had collected, the forged power of attorney, the fraudulent bank records, the recordings of Greg's confessions, was undeniable. My lawyer, Sarah, was calm and collected, ready to bring the truth to light. The judge had already ruled that the case could proceed, and I had a feeling Greg was starting to realize that this wasn't going to be the easy win he had expected. Greg's lawyer was the first to make his move. He stood up, his voice smooth and polished as he addressed the court. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client, Mr. Miller, is a man who has been wronged. His father-in-law, Eric Carter, is trying to take away his rights to the property that should rightfully belong to him and his wife, Mia." I watched as he spun his narrative, trying to paint me as a bitter, delusional old man, incapable of managing his own affairs. "Mr. Carter," he continued, "has been living in denial, holding on to a piece of property that he can no longer manage. His mental state has deteriorated, and he's unable to make rational decisions. Mr. Miller was simply trying to protect his wife and secure their future." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I kept my composure. I had been through worse. I had faced harder battles, both on the battlefield and in life. This was just another fight, but it didn't make it any less infuriating. The lies were thick, and the audacity was staggering. Greg was sitting next to his lawyer, his face a mask of arrogance. He didn't look at me, but I could feel his eyes burning into the side of my head. He had no idea what was coming. He thought he could outsmart me, outplay me. But he hadn't anticipated the one thing that had kept me going all these years: my patience. Sarah stood up next, her voice calm but firm. She had been building her case for months, and now it was time to show the court the truth. She began by addressing the judge. "Your Honor, we have evidence to show that Mr. Miller has been engaged in fraudulent activities. We have a forged power of attorney document, which he attempted to use to take control of the lake house. We also have financial records proving that he siphoned funds from the family business, all while pretending to be the concerned son-in-law." She turned to the jury, her eyes sweeping across them. "But it doesn't end there. We also have audio recordings where Mr. Miller explicitly confesses his plans to take control of Mr. Carter's property. He thought he could do this in secret, that no one would find out. But the truth has a way of coming to light." I could feel the weight of Sarah's words, each one landing like a hammer blow. The evidence was irrefutable. The lies Greg had been telling had no foundation anymore. He had been caught. But the moment that sealed his fate came when Sarah played the audio recording. The courtroom fell silent, as Greg Sipp's voice echoed through the speakers. "Yeah, babe, We said'll get rid of him soon enough. It sips too easy. He sips so damn old. He said'll never see it coming. We said'll take the house, and Mia one tipst even have to know what happened. It sips all ours. I could see the blood drain from Greg's face as the words hit him. He didn't know we had the recording. He had been so sure of himself, so confident that he could manipulate everyone. But now he was trapped. The proof was there. Mia's face was unreadable as she sat beside me. She had heard the recording before, but hearing it in court with everyone else listening was different. The weight of Greg's betrayal was finally clear to her. She hadn't wanted to believe it, but now there was no denying it. The man she had married had planned to destroy her family. Greg's lawyer scrambled to regain control of the situation. He stood up, trying to discredit the recording, claiming it was doctored, that it had been manipulated. But the judge was already raising his hand, signaling for silence. "Mr. Miller," the judge said, his voice steady but stern, "the evidence here is clear. There is no question that you have acted in bad faith. Your actions have been fraudulent and manipulative. You will have to answer for this." I watched as Greg's face twisted in disbelief. He hadn't prepared for this. He hadn't thought I would fight back like this. He thought he could take everything, the house, the money, Mia, and leave me with nothing. But now the tables had turned. The judge turned to the jury, his voice firm. "I believe you have seen enough to make your decision. We will adjourn for deliberation." As the court session ended, I felt a strange sense of relief. The weight of the battle, the years of waiting had all led to this moment. The truth was out, and Greg's empire of lies was crumbling. Mia turned to me, her eyes filled with tears. "Dad, am so sorry. I didn't see it before. I didn't want to believe it." I pulled her into a hug. "It's not your fault, Mia. You didn't know. But now will make sure he never does this again." As we left the courtroom, I knew it wasn't over yet. There would still be more to come. But the most important thing was that Greg had been exposed for who he truly was. And no matter what happened next, I knew we had won. Ends with the courtroom drama concluding. The twist lands and Greg's fate is sealed. By March 2020, the fallout was swift and unforgiving. It didn't take long for the full extent of Greg's actions to unravel. His reputation, already built on a shaky foundation, was now beyond repair. The court's decision was a heavy blow to him, but it wasn't the only one. Mia had spent days processing everything. At first she was angry, not at me, but at herself for not seeing the signs earlier. The man she had married, the man she thought she knew, had been deceiving her for years. His lies, his manipulation, all of it had been a carefully constructed web meant to entrap not just me, but her as well. She was devastated. The realization that Greg had been plotting to steal everything, the house, the money, the family business, shattered her trust in him. She hadn't just lost her husband. She had lost the person she thought she could rely on most. One evening, after a particularly tense phone call with Greg, Mia came to me. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. "Dad," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I can do this anymore. I thought I could fix it. I thought he would change, but I was wrong." I put my arm around her. "You don't have to fix it, Mia. He's the one who broke everything. You didn't do this. You didn't know." Mia Sip's shoulders trembled as she let out a shaky breath. "But I should known, I should seen it. How could I have been so blind?" "You weren't blind," I said firmly, trying to reassure her. "You trusted someone you loved. That not blindness, that faith. You gave him the benefit of the doubt. He's the one who betrayed that trust." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I leaving him, Dad. I don't know what comes next, but I can stay with him anymore. I don't know who he is anymore." It wasn't easy for Mia. She had built a life with Greg, and leaving him was the hardest decision she'd ever had to make. But the truth was out, and she could no longer ignore the damage he had caused. Greg, for his part, tried to spin the story in his favor. He reached out to Mia, pleading with her to come back, telling her everything was a misunderstanding. "You have to trust me, Mia," he told her over the phone. "I've done everything for you. This is all for us. Don't let your father turn you against me." But Mia had seen the truth, and no amount of pleading was going to change that. Greg's attempts to manipulate her only made things worse. It wasn't long before Mia made it clear that she was done. She packed her things, and by the end of the month she had moved out of the house they had shared. I watched as Mia took those first steps toward healing. It wasn't easy for her, but I could see the strength returning to her. She was starting over, and though it was painful, I could see that it was the best thing for her. As for Greg, his world was crumbling. The legal consequences of his actions were swift and unforgiving. The court had frozen the estate's assets, preventing him from making any more fraudulent transfers. But that was just the beginning. The truth about his dealings had been exposed, and it didn't take long for other investigations to surface. One of Greg's business associates, a man I had never trusted, turned out to be heavily involved in the same money laundering schemes Greg had been running. The authorities quickly connected the dots, and soon Greg found himself facing charges beyond fraud. There were investigations into embezzlement, money laundering, and criminal conspiracy. It was a web so tangled that Greg couldn't even begin to untangle it. The worst part for him, however, was the toll this took on his personal life, not just with Mia, but with his career and reputation. His professional connections evaporated. Friends he had relied on for years distanced themselves. His social circle crumbled, and without the support of Mia, without his once cozy image as the caring husband, he was left with nothing. I didn't feel sorry for him. Not for a second. He had made his bed, but I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice in watching him fall. It was hard to take pleasure in his downfall, but it felt like the right thing was finally being done. Greg had taken too much from me, from Mia, from everyone who had trusted him. It was time for him to face the consequences. I spent more time at the lakehouse in those days. It was quiet there, peaceful even. I could see the sunset from the porch, just like I always had. But now it wasn't the same. The memories of Barbara still lingered, and they always would, but it was no longer a place of sadness. It was a place of reflection, a place where I could finally feel like I had control again. Mia came to visit often. It wasn't easy, but we were rebuilding. It wasn't going to be an overnight process, but we were taking it day by day. It was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. In the end, Greg had underestimated us both. He thought he could manipulate Mia into siding with him. He thought he could take my legacy, my family, my home, and leave me with nothing. But in the end, it was him who had nothing. "You didn't lose me, Greg," I whispered one evening as I stood by the lake watching the sun dip below the horizon. "You gave me away." And as the sun set on the water, I knew it was over. Justice had been done, and the past was behind me. Ends with Eric standing by the lake, watching the sunset, ready to move forward with Mia by his side. By July 2021, everything had changed. The years of Greg's manipulation, his scheming, and his lies had finally come to a close. Justice had been served, and it felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The court had ruled in my favor, granting me full control of the estate and the lake house. The final piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. Greg had pled guilty to the charges of fraud, embezzlement, and attempted theft. The evidence we had presented, the forged power of attorney, the fraudulent bank records, the audio recordings, had been irrefutable. The judge had made it clear Greg was not just guilty of trying to steal my property, he was guilty of betraying his own family. The restitution order meant that Greg would have to pay back the money he had illegally siphoned off, and the restraining order ensured that he would never come near the lake house again or attempt to contact Mia. He had tried to destroy everything, my legacy, my family, my home, but in the end it was him who had lost it all. Mia had started to heal. The process wasn't easy. She still had moments when the weight of the betrayal hit her, but she was stronger now. She had come to understand the depth of Greg's manipulation, and though it had been painful, she was learning to trust again, not just me, but herself. I spent more time by the lake. It had always been my place of peace, the one place where I could reflect and find solace. But now it wasn't just a place of solitude, it was a place of reflection. The years with Barbara, the life we had built, and everything that had happened since were all part of the journey. It was a hard journey, but it had led me here to a place where I could breathe easy again. The truth about Greg had been exposed. His reputation was ruined, He was left with nothing, no career, no friends, no future. His desperation had led him to make decisions that had destroyed everything he had worked for, but it was all his doing. He had underestimated me, thinking I would fade into the background, thinking he could take whatever he wanted, but in the end it was him who had nothing. Mia had moved on from the house they had shared. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. She had been through so much, and this was her chance to rebuild her life on her terms. I supported her every step of the way. It wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about the emotional toll Greg's betrayal had taken on her. I'd had my own share of guilt, wondering if I had failed her somehow, if I had allowed Greg into our lives without seeing the warning signs. But I knew deep down that I had done what I could. I had tried to protect her from the worst, but Greg's manipulations had run deeper than either of us had realized. Now, though, Mia was free from his grasp. She was starting over, slowly but surely, and I was proud of her. I knew she would find her way. She was stronger than she thought. As for me, I found myself looking out over the lake more often than not. There were still days when the memories of Barbara felt heavy, but they didn't weigh me down as much anymore. I had fought for what was mine, for what mattered most, and I had won. The lake house wasn't just a home. It was a symbol of resilience, of family, of everything I had fought to protect. Greg's conviction had been the final chapter. His guilt was now a matter of public record, and his actions were no longer a secret. The weight of his manipulation had been lifted, and the scars would eventually fade. But for now, I was at peace. I had protected my legacy, my family, and my home. I had done what was right, and in the end, that was enough. Maya came to visit often. We spent hours talking, reminiscing about the past, and looking ahead to the future. She was healing, and I was healing with her. We weren't whole again yet, but we were getting there, and that was enough. As the days grew warmer, I found myself standing by the lake more often, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The world was still turning, and I was still here. I had fought for everything that mattered, and now I had it. I looked over at Mia, who was sitting on the porch with me, and smiled. "You know," I said, "we didn't lose anything. We gained everything." She smiled back, a look of understanding in her eyes. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I knew that the battle was over. Greg had been defeated, and everything he had taken from me, from us, had been returned. We were free. Ends with Eric and Mia sitting together by the lake, a quiet sense of peace settling over them as the sun sets on their past. As summer came to a close in 2021, I found myself sitting by the lake more often than I ever had before. The days were quieter now, the air crisp and cool, with the sounds of the water lapping against the shore. It felt like the world had slowed down, and for the first time in years I felt like I could breathe again. I had spent so much of my life fighting in the army, fighting to provide for my family, fighting to hold on to what I had left after Barbara passed. But now I wasn't fighting anymore. The war was over, and I had won. It had taken everything I had, but I had come through it. Mia was doing better too. She had started seeing a therapist, working through the pain of everything that had happened with Greg. It wasn't easy. It never would be. But she was finding her way. She was rebuilding her life, finding peace in the things that mattered, her career, her friendships, her own identity, separate from the toxic hold Greg had once had on her. She still visited the lake house, though less often. We would sit on the porch, watching the sun set together, talking about the future. It was a strange kind of peace, knowing we could move forward without the weight of Greg's manipulation hanging over us. There were moments when the grief would hit her, when the memory of Greg's betrayal would make her pause and take a breath. I saw it in her eyes sometimes, that familiar pain, the sting of lost trust. But she was stronger now, and every day I saw her inching closer to the life she deserved, a life free of lies, free of manipulation. As for me, I had found my own form of healing. The lake house, once a symbol of my past with Barbara, had become something else. It was a place of strength now, a place where I could look back on everything that had happened and feel gratitude for the lessons learned. I wasn't the same man I had been before the fight with Greg. That man was gone. But the man I had become, the man who had fought for his family, his home, his future, That man was stronger than ever. I didn't just survive this battle. I learned to live again. I learned to let go of the past in a way that didn't diminish it, but in a way that allowed me to move forward. I couldn't change what had happened with Greg, and I couldn't undo the pain it caused Mia. But I could make sure that we both had a future where that pain no longer controlled us. As I sat by the lake that evening, watching the last rays of sunlight dip below the horizon, I realized something. It wasn't just about winning, it wasn't just about justice, it was about protecting what mattered most, and in the end, it was love. Love for my daughter, love for my legacy, and love for the life Barbara and I had built together. Greg had thought he could take everything from me, but what he didn't realize was that the things that mattered, the things that made life worth living, couldn't be stolen. They could be tested, they could be hurt, but they couldn't be taken. My family, my home, my values, they were mine and no one could take that away. As the sun set on that quiet evening, I thought about how far I had come. From the day Greg had left me stranded in the woods, to the courtroom showdown, to this moment standing by the lake, free from the shadows of the past. It had been a long road, full of twists and turns, but in the end it had led me here. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with who I was and where I was in life. Mia joined me on the porch, sitting beside me in silence for a while. The cool breeze made the trees rustle, and the quiet of the lake enveloped us. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said after a moment. Her voice was soft, but there was strength in it. "I don't think I ever really told you that." I turned to her, surprised by the words. She hadn't said much like that before. "Proud of me?" I asked, a little taken aback. She nodded. "For everything you did, for protecting us, for not giving up, even when it seemed like all was lost. You kept fighting, and you never stopped loving me." I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. "I'll always fight for you, Mia. That's what family is. No matter what happens, I'll be here. You don't ever have to face this world alone." She reached over and took my hand, squeezing it gently. For the first time in a long time, I felt like everything was right in the world. We were both healing, both moving forward. We sat there for a long time, just watching the sunset, our silence speaking volumes. We didn't need to say anything more. We had come through the worst of it, and now we could look ahead together. And in that moment I knew we had both found our peace. The world may not always be just, but in the end justice had been served. Not just in the courts, but in the hearts of those who mattered most. Ends with Eric and Mia sitting together, the last rays of sunlight casting a peaceful glow over the lake house, signaling the end of one chapter and the beginning of another.